is author, Chonghua. I'm very happy that this book is out. We talked about this book since 2009, and the first draft was prepared in 2010, and it took many years to finally see this to fruition. I'm very happy for Chonghua and also for those who have taken part in the project. REFSA is a small think tank, very small to the extent that we have only one staff, which is Chonghua at the moment. We used to have a few more, but due to financial constraint, we have cut down to only Chonghua. But it has been our aspiration to not just work on day-to-day politics. I hope that one day Malaysian politics is about policies and not about personalities. It's not just about, or at least not just about personalities, not just about race, religion, royalty, but actually we work on policies. I hope one day most of the debates focuses on how to do things better and offering alternative based on facts. And of course this is a luxury in Malaysian politics now. Of course tonight if we talk about Muhyiddin, it will be more interesting. But as pointed out by Johari, just a few years ago, if you talk about what they call the Scorpion, you attract a big crowd. Anyway, I would like to just give a few remarks on three particular issues. Number one, democratic oversight of the armed forces or of the security sector. Second point, I would like to touch on the relationship between the police and the military. When we talk about security reform, I think we should also include discussions on the police. And thirdly, on diplomacy and how Malaysia sees itself in the world and in the region. Democratic oversight of the military. See, they are, of course, in every country, when it comes to military, the question of secrecy matters. The questions of how much to tell. And of course, there are abuses, there are corruptions, even in the US. Even in the US military, there are cases of corruptions which were investigated, and of course sentenced. People were sentenced, generals were sentenced to jail. But how to minimize corruption? How to minimize abuses within the armed forces? And also how to achieve a situation where the military is essentially treated as apolitical. I think democracy is important. There is a need to have some form of bipartisanship when it comes to the armed forces. That the armed forces must not be used for political purposes, but the armed forces is considered part of the democracy, part of the forces that safeguards our democracy. I had this experience back in 2010 when there was the issues of missing engines. Zahid Hamidi had very kindly organized a dinner for me and another opposition MP to meet with some generals who were involved in investigating the missing engines. And I told Zahid Hamidi at that time, I said, you should start this as a new way, that you should include the opposition, brief the opposition, not just because you're afraid of us criticizing you in the parliament, but you should do it as a long-term activity where you get opposition members to meet generals, get briefed by them. In camera, it's okay. Behind closed door, fine. But there should be this attempt. But that was a time when he was not eyeing for power. At that time, he was thinking that someone else will be deputy prime minister, so he couldn't care less. But I guess we need to have this, at the least, some form of bipartisanship when it comes to the governance of the military. Only when you have when you have this bipartisanship in parliament, you can reduce the chances of the military being used politically. when the military is not used politically, then a smooth transition is guaranteed. So when we talk about change of government, eventually, when it comes to change of government, apart from voting, it boils down to how the royalty will react, how the military will react, how the police will react, how the election commission will react, and how the courts will react. So, in envisaging a transition, an apolitical military force is important, and an apolitical military force with bipartisan concern or bipartisan oversight is something that we should strive for. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, very often we are bogged down by politics. Everyone is competing for politics. The military has military intelligence because they were not comfortable with the quality of a special branch report. Therefore, the military has military intelligence. Military intelligence spend a lot of time doing politics, checking on politics rather than checking on what happened as far as threats to the sovereignty is concerned. And there are other abuses which has been outlined by earlier people. So I hope at some point someone will say, let's have bipartisanship, let's create a military force that is entirely apolitical, and let's create a military force that we are proud of and with world standard. I want to touch on my second point is about police. Now we are actually very lucky in many ways. Compared to other Southeast Asian countries, say the Philippines, Indonesia, or Thailand, because of what happened in 1948, when the British were trying to, when the British dealt with the communist uprising, a choice was made. Instead of treating it as a military conflict, it was treated as a political conflict. And because of that, police was used rather than the military. And therefore, we built up the military at a very late stage. And it has always been under civilian control. Unlike Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines, where the military has always been very strong, and for the longest of time until recent decades, the military actually controlled the police. Only until recent decades that there are separations between the police force and the military. So we actually inherited something that is unique in many ways in Southeast Asia. And that is actually good that the military is entirely focusing on external forces and the police is supposed to focus on internal forces, internal challenges. But unfortunately, there's no, I mean, after a while, of course now Najib is talking about the Blue Ocean. Blue Ocean means joint police military patrol. I'm not very comfortable with that. But what I want to say is that you need an apolitical military. You also need to look at police reform. Apart from a military reform, I think there is a need to treat the police like we treat the military as well, that eventually there will be bipartisan oversight over the police. And I think the roles between the police and the military needs to be clarified again in light of what happened in Lahad. Now, I think ESCOM should be abolished. I think ESCOM should be abolished. The government has to make up its mind whether the military will be given the task to patrol, to manage ESCOM, to manage the eastern side of Sabah, or the police will be given the rights, and there should not be this confusion of agencies in Sabah. And ultimately, one agency must be tasked to manage the security situation in Sabah. I think it is unfortunate that it has come to this stage where ESCOM is more interested in building constructing various construction in the ESCOM area, rather than actually thinking about the security issues. And ESCOM itself is infected with this contractor problem or construction problem, trying to build buildings rather than dealing with military issues. So I think that is something that we should think about, how to clarify the relationship between the police and the military, again, in an overall security sector reform. My final point is that there is a need for us to look at how Malaysia positions itself in the region. There is a need for us to look at how Malaysia positions itself in the region. We know this term that war is an extension of foreign affairs or foreign policy. War is an extension of politics by other means. Ultimately, when we talk about security sector reform, we have to talk about how Malaysia positions itself. Whether Malaysia positions itself just as another third world country, or we see ourselves as a middle power. There's very little discussion in this country about what's going on around us. We are at the center of global attention. South China Sea is where global attention is at. But in our life, we don't talk about it. There's no debate about it. There's no discussion on in our national discourse. We don't talk about it. I think for Malaysia to be an important nation, a middle power, a country that is not big but has a reasonable input and influence on global politics, especially in our region, say the South China Sea. We must be able to project a global image that Malaysia is a serious global player. Malaysia is not a pariah state. That the Malaysian government and the people has some idea about what's going on around the world. We must not be seen as not having the understanding of what's going on in the region. And in that context, I think we need a lot of rethinking. For instance, Chonghua pointed out that there is a need for us to rethink where threat comes from. Now, the Malaysian military, for the longest of time, as pointed out by Chonghua, is seeing Singapore as its main threat. Therefore, you have 2/3 of the military personnel and assets in the army, but very little in the navy, very little in the air force. Now that balance has to be changed. Our threats is not from Singapore. I don't think our threats is from Thailand. Our threats are from the sea. Our threats are from the sky. And therefore, we need a stronger air force. We need a stronger navy. We may have to scale down the army in order to reallocate resources to build up a stronger navy. And our threat is no longer in the peninsula. See, most of the military assets and personnel are based in peninsula, but the wars are in Sabah. The troubles are in Sabah. The troubles are in South China Sea and not necessarily on the land in the peninsula. So I think we need to rethink our strategic picture, our strategic challenges and opportunities in order to build a new nation. Finally, there's this term called total defense, which is quite often used by the government. Total defense means defense the sovereignty and unity of the country with the commitment of all levels of society, not only from the government and the armed forces, but also from non-governmental agencies, the private sector, and the rakyat. I think if there's any award for total defense, Chonghua's books should be awarded a prize for telling ordinary people, sharing with ordinary Malaysians what defense is all about. A total defense strategy has to start from ordinary Malaysians understanding defense. It has to start with MPs having a chance to participate in defense debates about defense choices, and eventually the nation making defense choices with a democratic framework. Thank you very much.